Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen and enjoy my stories every day. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as I poured myself a cup of coffee. It was an ordinary Thursday, kids off to school, my wife Marcia off to work, and me settling into my home office for another day in IT. Life was routine, predictable, and I liked it that way. Or so I thought. Looking back now, the signs were always there, hiding in plain sight. Marcia's sudden obsession with late-night emails and her glowing recounting of work trips that I had never questioned. She'd smile, kiss me on the cheek, and promise to bring back souvenirs for the kids. Networking, she'd say, and I'd nod, thinking it was part of her growth in the corporate world. But the first real crack appeared when she left for one of these so-called work trips to Orlando. It was supposed to be a 3-day conference, a familiar story by now. I was cleaning out the garage, wrestling with years of accumulated junk, when I stumbled upon a suitcase tucked behind old camping gear. It looked like something she hadn't used in years, so I thought maybe I'd donate it to Goodwill. But curiosity got the better of me. I popped it open and found a collection of souvenirs, keychains, postcards, and shot glasses. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. But then I noticed something strange. They were from cities Marcia had never mentioned visiting. Miami, New York, Orlando. My mind raced, trying to reconcile this discovery with her constant stories about conference rooms and client dinners. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking. But deep down, my gut screamed otherwise. The next few days passed in a fog of doubt. Every interaction with Marcia felt off, like I was watching a stranger play the role of my wife. She called me each evening from the conference, her voice cheerful but distant. "How are the kids? Did you make sure Jeremy finished his homework?" she'd ask, slipping into her usual maternal tone. It all sounded so normal. Yet, my suspicion simmered beneath the surface. When she returned home, her suitcase carried the familiar scent of travel, a mix of hotel air conditioning and overpriced perfume. She handed me a t-shirt from Orlando, the kind you'd grab from a tourist shop at the last minute. "Thought you'd like this," she said, smiling. I smiled back, but it didn't reach my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to her, listening to her even breathing as my mind churned. What if there was more to her trips than she was letting on? Was I being paranoid, or was my gut right? I decided then and there to find out the truth. The next morning, after she left for work, I sat down with her laptop. It was risky, but I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. Marcia wasn't the most tech-savvy person, and luckily, she hadn't logged out of her email. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her inbox, expecting to find nothing but mundane work correspondence. What I found changed everything. Buried among the emails from her boss and clients were messages from a man named Jeremy. At first, they seemed innocent, discussions about industry trends and shared jokes. But as I dug deeper, the tone shifted. Inside jokes. References to nights spent together. My stomach dropped. I wasn't just looking at evidence of casual flirtation. This was a full-blown affair. I printed out a few of the worst emails, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I pulled up our shared bank account and cross-referenced her spending. Restaurant bills. Hotel charges. All from cities she'd claimed to visit for work. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the picture they painted was devastating. I didn't confront her right away. I needed, more proof. I began tracking her movements, installing an app on her phone that synced with mine. I knew it was an invasion of privacy, but at this point, I didn't care. I had to know the truth. The results were both illuminating and gut-wrenching. Marcia wasn't just having an affair, she was using me, our life, and our home as cover. Her conferences were nothing more than elaborate ruses to spend weekends with Jeremy in various cities. And the worst part? Sonia, her daughter from her first marriage, was in on it. I found text messages where Marcia coached Sonia on how to cover for her during her absences. The betrayal wasn't just marital, it was familial. I had raised Sonia like my own, and to see her complicit in her mother's lies felt like a knife twisting in my chest. For weeks, I went through the motions of life, pretending everything was fine. Marcia would kiss me goodbye in the mornings, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. At night, I'd lie awake, replaying every memory of our marriage, questioning what was real and what was a lie. One evening, as Marcia sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but emptiness. The woman I had loved for 12 years was gone, replaced by a stranger who smiled and lied with the same ease. I decided it was time to confront her. But this wouldn't be a screaming match or a plea for answers. No, this would be the calm before the storm. I had a plan, and I intended to execute it with precision. As I sat down at the dining table, the weight of what was to come settled over me. My life, my marriage, my family, it was all about to change forever. The night Marcia returned from her latest work trip was when it all came to a head. She breezed through the door with that familiar smile, her hair slightly tousled from travel but otherwise looking like the same woman I'd been married to for over a decade. She kissed me on the cheek, told me how much she'd missed me, and handed me another one of those cheap tourist souvenirs she'd picked up along the way. A keychain from Miami. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of disdain and sorrow as I took it. A keychain. As if that was all she thought I'd ever need to forgive her. Thanks, I muttered, my voice flat. She didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she didn't care. Marcia was oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. We made small talk as I cooked dinner, and she asked about the kids. Sonia was at a friend's house, and Jason was busy with his homework. It all felt too normal, like I hadn't just uncovered the deepest betrayal of my life. But I didn't let on. I had already made my decision. The truth was too clear now, I was done pretending. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat her down in the living room. I had been practicing what I would say all day. I didn't want to lose control, but I also didn't want to appear weak. I was done being the dutiful husband who pretended everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. This was about to be the reckoning. Marcia, I began, my voice steady but cold. We need to talk. She looked up from her phone, her eyebrows furrowing as if she were already guessing what was coming. Her smile slipped a little, but she didn't say anything. I know about Jeremy, I continued, my eyes locking with hers. And I know about all the lies. The trips. The hotels. The secret texts. I watched her face as I spoke, searching for a flicker of guilt, but she maintained that practiced mask of innocence. For a moment, she said nothing, just stared at me with wide eyes. Then, her lips trembled and she let out a small laugh, almost as if she thought I was joking. James, she said softly, almost pleading, what are you talking about? What's this all about? I didn't give her the satisfaction of explaining myself. I had enough evidence, and I didn't need to say more. Instead, I slid a folder across the table toward her. She looked at it, then back at me. Look through it, I said simply. Reluctantly, she opened the folder. Her eyes flicked over the printed emails, credit card statements, and flight itineraries. I watched as her face slowly changed, from confusion to disbelief, then to the resignation I knew was coming. She closed the folder after a few seconds and met my gaze. There was no defiance, no anger, just the faintest tremor in her voice. I never meant for you to find out like this. No, I corrected her, my tone sharp. You never meant for me to find out at all. But you didn't care about me, or our marriage. You didn't care about anything but getting what you wanted. She began, but the words faltered. She looked away for a moment, trying to collect herself. The calm facade she had always worn was slipping, revealing the vulnerability beneath, but it was too little, too late. "Why, Marcia?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "Why did you do this? Why did you throw everything away?" She hesitated, staring down at her hands as if the answers were written on her palms. Finally, she sighed and looked up at me, her face a mix of regret and defiance. "I wasn't happy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been feeling trapped, James. You work all the time, and I'm here, alone. I wanted to feel alive again. I wanted to feel wanted. I didn't say anything right away. I couldn't." The words she spoke sounded so familiar, so rehearsed. But it wasn't the first time I'd heard that excuse. It wasn't even the second or third. Every cheater I'd ever heard about or read about used the same line. It wasn't about me, it was about them, about their needs, their dissatisfaction, their hunger for something new. Something different. I had been there for her through thick and thin, helping her get through school, supporting her career, being there for the kids, for every milestone. But all of that meant nothing to her. The bond we'd built, the promises we'd made, the love we'd sworn to keep, it was all disposable. "You could have talked to me," I said quietly, still trying to keep my anger in check. "You could have come to me with your problems. But you didn't. You just decided to destroy everything we built together." Her eyes welled up with tears now, but I wasn't moved. "Not anymore." "I'm sorry, James," she whispered, but it was too little, too late. I had already felt the weight of her lies for too long. "I don't believe you," I said, my voice unwavering. "I don't believe you're sorry. I don't believe any of it." I stood up, pacing the living room, my mind racing. This wasn't just about a betrayal. This was about years of deceit. Years of being played for a fool. I had given her everything I had, and she had taken it, using my love as a stepping stool to feed her own insecurities and desires. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice small, almost childlike. The guilt was there now, but it didn't matter. I couldn't forgive her. Not for this. "I don't know," I said coldly, turning to face her. "But I do know this, I'm done." For the first time, I saw a flicker of real fear in her eyes. The reality of the situation was sinking in. She had thought she could have it all, my love, my money, my loyalty, but she had been playing with fire, and now the flames were starting to consume everything. The silence between us was thick, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. I felt a sickening relief wash over me. I wasn't the one who had betrayed her, she was the one who had destroyed our marriage, our family, with her lies. And it was time for me to take control. "Pack your things, Marcia," I said, turning toward the door. "You're leaving. And this time, I won't be waiting for you to come back." She didn't argue. She didn't protest. She just sat there, stunned, as if she hadn't expected me to make the decision for her. But she had made her choice years ago, and now it was my turn to choose. And I was choosing to end it. I had seen enough, and I would no longer be the fool in this twisted play. The curtains were falling on our marriage, and I was walking off the stage for good. It's strange how quickly your life can change when you stop pretending. One moment, everything seems like it's just rolling along, the same old routine day after day, and then, just like that, it's all gone. It was only a few days after that confrontation with Marcia when the weight of what I'd decided hit me fully. Divorce. Custody battles. The end of the life I thought I'd built with her. It felt surreal, like I was watching it all unfold in a movie and not actually living it. The house was quiet that evening. The kids were with their grandparents for the weekend, a visit they'd been planning for weeks. Marcia, for the first time since I'd confronted her, was strangely calm. She didn't try to apologize again, didn't try to justify her actions. She just accepted the fact that I was done, and that was far more dangerous than any screaming match or tear-filled pleas for forgiveness. For the next couple of days, we didn't speak much. She kept to her room, packing her things, while I focused on preparing for what was next. The paperwork had already been filed, my lawyer was good, and he assured me that custody would be in my favor given Marcia's infidelity. She might have been the mother, but I was the rock, the one who had been there day in and day out. As hard as it was to admit, I knew that I could give my kids a more stable, loving environment than she ever could. On the surface, I felt numb, as if I were moving through the motions of my life without any emotional connection to it. But underneath that numbness, there was something else, something darker and more potent: satisfaction. For the first time in years, I was in control. And it felt damn good. Marcia had asked me several times what was going to happen next, but I'd been firm in my resolve. I wouldn't let her dictate this process anymore. This was no longer about us, about the marriage, about the past. This was about me, my future, and my kids' future. One evening, after she had finished packing, I told her to sit down. I'd been thinking about what to do next, and I wasn't going to waste time. The last thing I wanted was for this to drag on longer than necessary. "Marcia," I said, looking directly at her as she sat across from me at the dining table. She was trying to keep her composure, but I could see the cracks starting to form. There were bags under her eyes, her skin looked pale and drawn, as if she'd been carrying a weight she couldn't quite shake off. I didn't pity her, I had no sympathy left. She had made her bed, and now it was time for her to lie in it. "I've been thinking about the divorce," I continued, my voice steady, even. "We both know this is going to get ugly. Custody, alimony, the house, but I'm not here to make this more complicated than it already is. I've already spoken with my lawyer. We'll file the papers next week, and I'll be asking for full custody." She blinked, clearly surprised by the firmness in my tone. I could see the realization in her eyes. She thought maybe she'd have some kind of advantage in this. She was the mother, after all. But not anymore. "I'll take the house," I said. "I've been the one keeping it together, paying the bills, maintaining the property. You can leave. We'll divide everything as fairly as possible. I don't want to fight over possessions. This is about the kids." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She just stared at me, lost in thought, no longer the confident woman she used to be. It was as if she were seeing me for the first time, the man she had once loved, the man who was now her judge, jury, and executioner. "I'm sorry," she said quietly after a long pause, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for this to happen." I didn't respond right away. I didn't owe her an explanation. Her apology, though heartfelt, felt hollow. She wasn't sorry for me, she was sorry for herself. Sorry that the lies had been exposed. Sorry that her perfect world had shattered. "I'm not interested in your apology, Marcia," I said, my voice low but cutting. "You had your chance to make things right, and you chose to lie to me. You chose to betray me and the family we built. Now it's time to face the consequences." She nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. I saw her reaching for her phone, probably to call her affair partner, Jeremy. She had been texting him throughout the day, still clinging to the illusion that he would somehow save her from the mess she'd made. But I wasn't going to let her off that easy. "I've already spoken to a realtor," I said, making it clear I was moving forward without hesitation. "The house is going up for sale. I'm not going to drag this out any longer." Her face went white, and for a brief moment, I almost felt a twinge of guilt. But it passed quickly. She had made this mess. She was going to have to clean it up. For a while, neither of us spoke. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, and the quiet, unspoken tension that filled the room. It was a new silence, one born of finality. Marcia stood up eventually, her movements slow and deliberate, as though she were trying to make some kind of graceful exit from a life she had spent years building with me. She didn't speak as she walked past me, but I could hear her sniffle as she reached the door to the hallway. Goodbye, James, she said quietly, almost to herself, before she disappeared down the hall. I didn't answer. What was there to say? I was already done. It was over. The moment she was gone, I sat down in the silence. There was no sense of triumph or victory. No celebration. There was only a strange emptiness, a realization that everything I had worked for, everything I had loved, had been shattered. But the emptiness didn't last long. It was soon replaced by something else, clarity. I wasn't just leaving her. I was leaving that version of myself behind as well, the version who had been blind to the truth, the version who had sacrificed his happiness for the sake of a woman who never truly valued him. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the darkened street. Life would go on, I knew that much. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own fate. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew one thing for sure, I was ready for whatever came next. It had been months since Marcia left, but every day felt like a step further away from the man I had been. The one who had believed in her. The one who had trusted her, loved her. That person was gone, buried under the weight of the betrayal, the lies, and the mess we had left behind. What remained was a version of me who had learned to live without her, without the pain she brought. I had the kids more often than not, and in many ways, they had become my lifeline. They were innocent in all of this, and I was determined to keep them shielded from the fallout. I'd moved into a smaller place, something more fitting for me and the kids, and while it wasn't ideal, it was ours. The place felt empty sometimes, but it was peaceful. We were healing, slowly, but surely. The custody battle, like I knew it would be, was messy. Marcia fought tooth and nail for visitation rights, playing the mother card, but it was clear to the court, to everyone, that I was the one who had been the steady, loving parent. As time went on, the court sided with me, granting me full custody. Marcia didn't contest it much after that, not after the damage had been done. She visited the kids less and less, her own life now filled with Jeremy and whatever drama came with him. But that wasn't the surprise. No, the surprise came one evening, about a year after everything had fallen apart. It was a Saturday night, and I was sitting in the living room, sipping on a glass of whiskey while the kids played in their rooms. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt right, the kind where you didn't feel like there was anything more you needed to fix. I thought about the past, about what had happened and where I'd ended up. I had been strong. I had done everything I needed to do, made all the right decisions. And I had moved on. That was the lie I had been telling myself. The knock on the door came just as I was about to finish my drink. It was late, too late for any of the neighbors to be dropping by. I frowned, setting the glass down and heading for the door. I looked through the peephole and froze. It was Marcia. I opened the door slowly, unsure what to expect. She looked different. Not physically, but the way she carried herself, there was something different in her posture, her eyes. "James," she said, her voice soft, but with a kind of resolve I hadn't heard in years. "I need to talk to you. Please, just give me a minute." I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. I hadn't seen her in months, hadn't even thought about her much outside of the occasional thought about the kids. But something about her presence on my doorstep felt unsettling. I knew I should have turned her away. But something held me there. "Fine," I said, stepping back and letting her into the house. She didn't look the same as the confident, selfish woman I'd known. She seemed almost fragile, like she was carrying something heavy that she didn't know how to share. We sat in the living room, the silence stretching out between us. I was unsure how to begin this conversation. After all, what was there left to say? But Marcia spoke first, breaking the tension. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, James," she began, her eyes dropping to the floor. "About the affair, about how I treated you, about everything. I've been trying to move on, to move past all the damage I caused, but the truth is, I can't. And I don't think I ever will. I didn't respond at first. I didn't want to. I'd spent so long convincing myself I didn't need closure, that I had moved past the betrayal, past the hurt. But here she was, saying the words I never thought I'd hear. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't expect you to forgive me, James. I don't even expect you to want anything to do with me, but I needed to tell you this. For myself. I've ruined so many things in my life, and I don't know how to fix it." There was a sincerity in her words, something raw, something real that I hadn't expected. But the truth was, I had already forgiven her. I had forgiven her long ago, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger that had been eating at me. Holding on to that bitterness had been a prison for me, not for her. I took a deep breath, leaning back in my chair. "I'm not angry anymore, Marcia. Not at you. Not at the situation. I've let go of all of that." She looked at me, her eyes wide. "You've moved on." I nodded. "I have. It wasn't easy, but I did." "Are you happy?" she asked, the question almost tentative. I paused, considering her words. Was I happy? It wasn't a simple question. Happiness wasn't something I had found in a quick fix, or in a relationship, or even in the kids. Happiness was something that came in moments, in flashes, in the way the sun hit the trees in the morning or how my daughter laughed when she and her brother played in the backyard. It was in the quiet moments of the night when I realized I had built something better for myself, something real. "I'm getting there," I said finally. "It's not perfect. But I'm learning." Marcia nodded slowly, as if trying to process everything. She seemed to shrink in on herself, the weight of her own guilt and regret becoming too much to bear. There was a long pause, and then she surprised me once again. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My stomach dropped, and for a moment, I couldn't even speak. I stared at her, disbelief crossing my face. "What?" I'm pregnant, James," she repeated. "And it's not Jeremy's." I didn't know what to say. The room seemed to spin. After everything, after all that had happened, this? A child? I had no idea how to process it. Whose is it, then?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. Her eyes met mine, and she exhaled slowly, as if steeling herself. "Yours." The world seemed to tilt as my mind struggled to catch up. There were so many emotions battling inside of me, shock, anger, confusion, but more than anything, there was the feeling of betrayal, all over again. I stood up, pacing the room. "You've got to be kidding me. You've been with him, lying to me for how long, and now?" "James, I didn't plan this. I didn't ask for this to happen," she interrupted, her voice frantic. "I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know how to fix my life. And I turned back to face her, the words suddenly tumbling out. "You never had any idea how to fix anything. You just kept making mess after mess and running from the consequences." She looked at me, her eyes filled with sorrow, but also something else, regret, maybe, or maybe it was the weight of years of unresolved mistakes. "I never wanted to hurt you, James. And I don't expect you to take me back. I don't even think I deserve that." I stood there in the silence, the weight of it all sinking in. It was a moment I had never expected. A moment where everything I had thought was finally settled, divorce, moving on, my life in pieces, was suddenly upended by a new, shocking truth. And in that moment, as I looked at her, at Marcia, the woman who had destroyed me but somehow still clung to some piece of me, I realized the answer wasn't just in the child she was carrying. It was in how I chose to handle it. Maybe I'd forgiven her. But forgiveness didn't mean I had to embrace every part of her life. It didn't mean I had to make things right for her again. I had my own life to live now. And I was going to live it on my terms. I don't know what to say, Marcia, I said finally, my voice steady again, with no room left for anger or confusion. I'm not the man I was. And I don't think I can be that man again. Not for you. Not for anyone. She looked at me one last time, a tear slipping down her cheek. And I realized then that I had moved on. Not because I was bitter or angry, but because I had learned how to live for myself again. And that was the final freedom. The freedom to walk away, even when the past knocked on your door, asking for one more chance. And in the end, I closed that door. For good.